The Wild West never truly ended. It just moved into the stars. In the forgotten corners of sci-fi history lies a subgenre so bold and so bizarre it almost feels like a fever dream. The space western. Outlaws traded their horses for starships. Sheriffs carried laser six-shooters, and dusty saloons stood on alien world where law was scarce and survival was everything. But while modern blockbusters drown in billion-dollar budgets and CGI spectacle, many of these strange, daring experiments from decades past still pack more grit, charm, and imagination than Hollywood's latest offerings. Some vanished after a single release, others were buried by poor marketing or canceled too soon. And yet they remain too good to stay forgotten. Welcome to Vintaverse, where forgotten classics come back to life. Today, we're unearthing 10 forgotten space westerns that are still better than modern movies. Stick around because the last one on this list is so strange, so brilliant, and so buried that once you hear about it, you'll wonder how it isn't already a cult legend. Number 10. Moon 02, 1969. Long before Star Wars, before Firefly, and decades before Hollywood even had the nerve to call something a space western, Hammer Films released Moon 02, often described as the first moon western. It was equal parts psychedelic pulp and frontier drama, a movie that tried to imagine what the lawless spirit of the Old West would look like transplanted onto the surface of the moon. The story follows Bill Kemp, a washed-up astronaut turned salvager, who is hired by a shady tycoon to capture a massive sapphire asteroid and crash it into the moon for profit. But like any true western, there's more at play than gold, or in this case, sapphires. Alongside a woman searching for her missing brother, Kemp is pulled into a frontier war of greed, betrayal, and survival on the edge of human civilization. Yes, it's campy. Yes, it screams 1969 with its bright colors and oddball production. But beneath the kitsch, you see the DNA of every space western that followed. It dared to blend genres decades before Hollywood was ready, and in its boldness, it feels more imaginative than many modern films that play it safe. Moon 02 is not just a forgotten experiment, it's a time capsule of raw creativity that proves sometimes ambition matters more than polish. Number 9. Space Hunter. Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, 1983. Released during the sci-fi boom of the early 80s, Space Hunter: Adventures in the Forbidden Zone could have been just another forgettable Star Wars knockoff. Instead, it carved out something grittier, stranger, and much more dangerous. Think Mad Max colliding with a Saturday matinee serial, and you're only halfway there. The movie begins when 3 women crash land on the hostile planet Terra 11 after their luxury space liner exploded. This planet is no paradise. It's a wasteland of deserts, mutant-infested ruins, and the iron grip of a villain known only as Overdog. Overdog isn't your typical space tyrant. He's a grotesque cybernetic warlord who rules with cruelty, turning survival into a sadistic game. Enter Wolf, a rugged bounty hunter drifting through the galaxy, who takes the job of rescuing the women. Alongside him is Nikki, a teenage scavenger played by a young Molly Ringwald, who injects scrappy energy and constant banter into the bleakness of the mission. Together, they trek across desolate wastelands, battle mutant gangs, and finally face Overdog in his twisted death arena. What makes Space Hunter stand out, even today, is its rawness. Unlike polished modern sci-fi that hides behind digital effects, Space Hunter feels tactile. The deserts are real, the stunts are dangerous, the world is dirty and unforgiving. You can practically feel the heat, the dust, and the menace in every frame. Number 8. Oblivion, 1994. If you ever wanted to see a showdown between cowboys, aliens, and androids on a desert planet, Oblivion is the hidden gem you never knew you needed. Released straight to video in the 90s, this film leaned so hard into its genre mashup that it became unforgettable, even if Hollywood buried it almost immediately. The story begins in the frontier town of Oblivion, a settlement that could be ripped straight from an old John Ford Western, if not for the aliens, cyborgs, and laser duels. Life here is hard, brutal, and short, and the only thing keeping order is Sheriff Stone. Then there is Zack Stone, the sheriff's estranged son, who wants nothing to do with the fight, but destiny has other plans. Forced to face the murderer of his father, Zack reluctantly takes up the badge and rallies an unlikely crew: a cyborg deputy, a time-traveling gunslinger, and even a fortune-telling alien sidekick. Together they try to wrestle the town back from Red Eyes, in a finale of laser shootouts, alien brawls, and campy one-liners. What makes Oblivion stand out isn't just the weirdness, it's the confidence. It doesn't hide its B-movie roots. Instead, it embraces them, going all in on mixing genres Hollywood wouldn't dare touch. Where modern blockbusters often feel polished, Oblivion feels like pure creative chaos. It's messy, yes, but it's also fearless. Number 7. Space Rangers, 1993. Not every classic gets the chance to live, and Space Rangers is the perfect example. A short-lived CBS series from 1993, it only lasted 6 episodes before being canceled. And yet, for those who caught it, it remains one of the most underrated TV space westerns ever made. Set in the year 2104, Space Rangers followed the lawmen of Fort Hope, a battered outpost on the very edge of known space. These weren't sleek Federation officers living in utopia. They were tired, overworked, and underpaid sheriffs trying to keep order in a galaxy full of smugglers, pirates, and alien mercenaries. In other words, it was the Wild West in space, dusty, dangerous, and unpredictable. Each episode played like a space frontier adventure. Sometimes the Rangers were outgunned by alien raiders. Sometimes they had to break uneasy truces with smugglers just to survive. And sometimes they simply had to draw first and hope to live another day. It wasn't polished like Star Trek, nor sprawling like Babylon 5, but it had grit, heart, and a grounded sense of danger that made it unforgettable. The tragedy of Space Rangers is that it came too early. Audiences didn't know what to make of it, and CBS buried it with a bad time slot. But revisiting it today, it feels ahead of its time, like the blueprint for shows such as Firefly that would come later. Number 6. Battle Beyond the Stars, 1980. Long before Marvel dominated cinema with its shared universes, Roger Corman, the king of low-budget genius, gave us a cult space western that was basically the Magnificent Seven in space. Battle Beyond the Stars is the kind of forgotten gem that should be studied in film schools. Cheap, rushed, and yet bursting with creativity that still outshines modern blockbusters. The story begins on the peaceful planet Akir, a world under threat from the sadistic warlord Sador, played with unhinged menace by John Saxon. Sador commands a massive stellar fortress armed with a doomsday weapon capable of annihilating planets. His ultimatum is simple: surrender or die. The people of Akir have no military, no ships, and no hope until a young farmer named Shad decides to fight back. Borrowing from the DNA of 7 samurai and the Magnificent Seven, Shad ventures across the galaxy to recruit a ragtag team of mercenaries, smugglers, and outcasts willing to defend his home. Among them, a lizard-like warrior seeking honor, a pair of telepathic aliens who fight as one, a hired assassin with a grudge, and a voluptuous Valkyrie pilot named Saint Xman, played by Sybil Danning, a character who embodies the pulpy spirit of the film. Together, this unlikely band of heroes returns to Akir for a showdown against Sador's unstoppable armada. On paper, it sounds like a cheap Star Wars clone, but here's the magic. Behind the scenes, a young James Cameron was working as a set designer and special effects wizard. You can already see the seeds of his future brilliance in the models, explosions, and world building. Every shot feels bigger than the budget, every effect more ambitious than it has any right to be.
Number 5. Outland, 1981. If you've ever wondered what high noon would look like transplanted onto the surface of Jupiter's moon Io, Outland has your answer. Directed by Peter Hyams and starring Sean Connery, this is one of the grittiest, most underrated space westerns ever made, and one that feels almost prophetic today. The story centers on Federal Marshal William O'Neill, newly assigned to a mining colony on Io. At first, it's just another routine posting, until O'Neill discovers a dark secret. Miners are dying under mysterious circumstances, suffering psychotic breakdowns before killing themselves in gruesome ways. As O'Neill investigates, he uncovers the truth. The deaths are caused by a dangerous stimulant secretly distributed to boost productivity. The corporation running the colony knows about it and looks the other way, because profits matter more than human lives. When O'Neill tries to expose the truth, he becomes a marked man. The company hires assassins to silence him, and the lawless colony turns against him. What follows is pure Western storytelling, a lone marshal standing against corruption, isolated in a town where everyone else has been bought. The tension builds to a climactic showdown echoing the dusty streets of high noon, except here, the duel unfolds against the backdrop of Io's stark, airless surface. Connery's performance is raw, weary, and heroic without being flashy. That grounded realism makes the stakes feel higher than the galaxy-saving nonsense of many modern blockbusters. Number 4. The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers, 1986. Sometimes forgotten treasures aren't live action at all. Sometimes they're hidden in Saturday morning cartoons, and The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers is one of those gems. Airing in 1986, this animated series combined the neon flash of the 80s with classic Western tropes and a surprisingly dark sci-fi storyline. The premise is wild. In the year 2086, Earth makes contact with aliens, and the result isn't peace, it's a new frontier. To police the galaxy, a squad known as the Galaxy Rangers is formed. But unlike other kid-friendly shows of the time, Galaxy Rangers didn't sugarcoat things. Its heroes were cybernetically enhanced lawmen, each with unique abilities, patrolling worlds filled with smugglers, slavers, and interstellar outlaws. The team included Zachary Fox, a ranger with a bionic arm after his wife is kidnapped by aliens, Shane Gooseman, a genetically engineered gunslinger with the power to adapt to any threat, Nico, a psychic with archaeological knowledge, and Doc Hartford, a tech genius with a witty edge. They weren't invincible, they got hurt, they faced tragedy, and they dealt with real consequences. The animation itself wasn't groundbreaking by today's standards, but the storytelling was bold for a kid's cartoon. Episodes dealt with loss, corruption, and the weight of justice on the edge of civilization. Watching it now, you realize Galaxy Rangers was ahead of its time. It fused the archetypes of sheriffs and gunslingers with futuristic gadgets and cyberpunk flair, creating a world that still feels fresh today.
Number 3. Trigun, 1998. Few anime series embody the spirit of a Western in space quite like Trigun. Released in 1998, it was set in a desolate desert world where water is scarce, lawlessness reigns, and every gunslinger is one bad decision away from a duel. But Trigun wasn't just about shootouts, it was about morality, survival, and the weight of violence in a world where peace seems impossible. The story follows Vash the Stampede,
Stampede, a wandering outlaw with a bounty so high that entire towns quake at the sound of his name. Nicknamed the Humanoid Typhoon, Vash is rumored to leave destruction everywhere he goes. But here's the twist. Vash isn't a ruthless killer. He's a kind-hearted, goofy, almost clownish drifter who avoids violence whenever he can. Underneath the jokes and bumbling facade, however, is a man haunted by tragedy and carrying a past darker than anyone realizes. As the series unfolds, Vash's contradictions drive the story. He's a man who refuses to kill even when surrounded by enemies. He saves towns that fear him, protects people who betray him, and smiles while carrying a burden that would break most men. Along the way, he faces deadly assassins, mercenaries, and the looming threat of his mysterious brother Knives, a figure tied to his origins and the truth about the world they inhabit. Number 2. Cowboy Bebop. If Trigun gave us the drifting gunslinger on a desert planet, Cowboy Bebop gave us the full-blown Outlaws ballad in space. Released in 1998, it has been hailed as one of the greatest anime of all time, but in the broader pop culture landscape, it remains oddly underappreciated, overshadowed by mainstream sci-fi, and often dismissed as just a cartoon. That's a mistake, because Cowboy Bebop is more than just anime. It's one of the most stylish, soulful space westerns ever made. The series follows the crew of the Bebop, a rundown starship crewed not by noble heroes, but by bounty hunters, people chasing criminals across the galaxy for cash, barely scraping by. At the center is Spike Spiegel, a former gangster turned drifter with a gunslinger's calm and a haunted past. Alongside him is Jet Black, an ex-cop with a mechanical arm and a weary sense of duty. Faye Valentine, a femme fatale gambler with debts and secrets. Edward, a chaotic hacker prodigy. And Ein, a genetically enhanced corgi with more brains than most humans. What makes Cowboy Bebop a masterpiece is how it blends genres. Each episode feels like a western, a noir, a crime thriller, or even a jazz improv, and yet all tied together with a cosmic melancholy. The bounty hunters may chase criminals, but they're really chasing their own ghosts. Spike is haunted by his past with a syndicate and a lost love. Jet wrestles with betrayal and disillusionment. Faye searches for her identity, frozen in time and lost in the future. It's a show drenched in mood. From its legendary opening sequence with Yoko Kanno's explosive jazz score, Tank, to its quiet, lonely moments in space, Bebop creates a world that feels lived in and broken. The gunfights are ballitic, the characters flawed and human, the settings dripping with Western grit. Even today, there is nothing quite like it. A space Western, yes, but also a tragedy, a jazz performance, and a love letter to everything cinema can be. Forgotten by the mainstream, worshipped by those who know it, Cowboy Bebop is timeless.
Number 1. The American Astronaut, 2001. Now we reach the strangest of them all, a film so forgotten, so bizarre, that it almost feels like an artifact from another dimension. The American Astronaut isn't just a space western, it's a rock and roll musical, a surreal fever dream, and one of the most original sci-fi experiments ever put on screen. And yes, in its audacity, it's better than most modern movies. Written, directed, and starring Corey McCabe, the film follows Samuel Curtis, a space traveler and smuggler drifting through a universe that looks more like a dusty roadside bar than a galaxy far, far away. Curtis isn't a hero. He's not saving worlds. He's doing odd jobs, transporting a cat, smuggling goods, and bartering across planets where outlaw gangs, lonely miners, and broken dreamers make up the population. But here's the twist. The entire film unfolds like a rock opera, filled with musical numbers that are as weird as they are mesmerizing. Characters break into songs about loneliness, about women on distant planets, about life in isolation. The cinematography is stark black and white, giving it the feel of an old indie western, while the plot drifts between surreal comedy and bleak tragedy. There's no polished CGI, no Hollywood spectacle, just grit, music, and imagination. One moment, Curtis is dancing awkwardly in a dive bar on an asteroid. The next, he's confronting bizarre enemies in a duel that feels like both a gunfight and a dream sequence. It's a movie that doesn't explain itself. It just sweeps you into its rhythm, and that's why we think it deserves the #1 spot. Because in the end, a forgotten film that risks everything, story, style, and sanity, stands taller than a modern blockbuster that risks nothing. The American Astronaut is proof that the wild frontier of cinema still exists, not in billion-dollar franchises, but in the forgotten corners where imagination runs free. Which of these films surprised you the most? Have you seen any of them? Are there other space westerns you think deserve more love? Do you think we should have added a particular movie? We read every comment, and we want to hear from you. If you loved this journey into the wild frontier of forgotten space westerns, make sure to subscribe to Vintaverse, where nostalgia never fades and the forgotten always return.